Jimmy Chung was a one-of-a-kind force of nature. He was a true Renaissance man of eclectic talents, interests, and skills. His life force was one of such power and brightness that it's nearly impossible to imagine him gone. To describe him in one eulogy is an impossible task, and though I will do my best, any endeavor to capture the spirit of Jimmy in a few short minutes is doomed to failure. But I'll try. So I can tell you he was in life in various professional capacities: a computer technician, a seller of high technology, a locksmith, a corporate executive, and a roller skating parking lot attendant. On an amateur level, he was an electrician, plumber, floor layer, tile installer, cabinet installer, accidental and purposeful demolitionist, and virtually any other kind of tradesman that the situation necessitated. In his youth in Missouri, he showed his entrepreneurial spirit early. When a new subdivision was developed adjacent to his own, Jimmy went to each new homeowner and sold them peepholes for their front doors. The service he provided was turnkey. He bought the peepholes wholesale, and he installed them himself. He saw an opportunity and he seized it. This is the kind of initiative you don't find in a lot of teenage boys. But Jimmy Chung was special. Jimmy Chung was unique. And as I said at the beginning, he was one of a kind. He was one of a kind. Fate smiled in my life on me in the 10th grade. And by the way, if Bush is here, I'd love a water. I can already tell him, isn't it? Fate smiled on me in the 10th grade when Jimmy, the new student from another state, was seated next to me in Miss Barton's government class. Thank you. Miss Martin, she was an evil woman. An oversized, beastly taskmaster who feasted on the souls of the academically disinterested. Jimmy soon became another regular entree in her buffet of the damned, joining Danny Holloway, I believe, I know he's here, and I in regular detention, and on our special scholastic dishonor rolls. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to tell you the story of the very first interaction between Jimmy and myself. At the end of our first hour together, in an early failed attempt at racial profiling, I reached to him in a gesture of typical kindness and generosity and offered to copy his homework, so I wouldn't have to do mine. Jimmy gladly obliged, but said he wouldn't be done with it until after school and wanted my address so I could drop it off. I gave it to him and went about the rest of my day. Unfortunately, I forgot that Jimmy was coming. And when I finally got home in early evening, I was faced with a very angry mother. She's right there. She demanded to know who this Jimmy Chung was and why he was doing my homework for me. She instructed me to return it. And she instructed me to return it and go upstairs immediately and do the work myself. And I agreed, took the homework from her, went upstairs and copied it anyway. I made a D. Exasperated, I confronted Jimmy the next day and essentially asked him, "What kind of Oriental are you?" He simply shrugged and said, "Sorry, man, if you could do better, do it yourself." Knowing that wasn't a realistic option, I selflessly forgave Jimmy and began forging a relationship, a friendship based on mutual appreciation of scholastic underachievement, an appreciation of Tina, the sexy new waver who sat across from us in exciting new short skirts each day, and of our mutual contempt for the ghastly Miss Martin. Now, Jimmy was nothing if not handy. Upon properly meeting my parents the first time without homework in hand, he noticed an electric bathroom scale in the trash and retrieved it, disassembled it, repaired it, and handed it to my amazed parents. They were astonished and impressed and grew more so the longer they knew him. Having a friend like Jimmy Chung made someone look good to his folks. That's important when you're young. He always made me look good. I think they felt good knowing I had friends like Jimmy Chung. I was okay. On another occasion, Jimmy put his skills to work for the better good of man by installing a loudspeaker behind the grill of my Ford Bronco. He hooked it up to a CV so I could, and he and I could, we had the opportunity to share our very thoughts and opinions with all of humanity. Joined by the infamous Moore brothers, we would pass our time wreaking havoc at the local putt-putt, offering free trips to Hawaii for the next golfer to hit a hole-in-one. or at the drive-through lines of fast food restaurants where we provide creative ordering instructions or feedback for those wanting to buy food. Jimmy always knew how to have fun, and we never stopped having fun together, ever. If I was with him, I was having fun. It just came with the territory if you were friends with Jimmy Chung. Now, Jimmy Chung was also the inventor of social networking, not the digital kind, though that wouldn't have surprised me. His was of the analog variety, and it was amazing just the same. I saw it in action early in our friendship. Somehow we'd meet other friends, and at first, slowly, always casually, he would reveal his personality, his subtle charms, his unique charisma. Over time, he'd eventually find himself a part of their lives, and they'd appreciate having someone so vibrant and positive around. He'd then meet their friends, and the same phenomenon would happen again and again and again. No one was immune from what Jimmy offered. Later in life, I found myself surrounded by my circle of closest friends. This is now, right? These friends usually originated from my school experience, but as Jimmy was a central part of my life and always in my orbit, they would inevitably be exposed to him. And the Jimmy Chung the virus would strike. There is no cure. Jimmy became as close or closer to my closest friends than I was. He became our social center and our heart. This was simply inevitable, and it is and will always be one of my greatest joys. As Poodle, Lala, Nubby, Turtle, Keithy.com, Sophie Wofi, Joshy Washy, Gimpy Gimp, Tumbly Tom Moore, T-Ray, The German, Linda Lou, Random Man, G-Man, Blinky, Jumpin' John Moore, Holmes, and the beloved Franny will tell you, Jimmy loved nicknames. He had a nickname for everybody. If you didn't like yours, it's Oodles and Noodles and Doodles and Where's Poodle? If you didn't like yours, well, that was just tough luck. Jimmy's preferred nickname for me was Stinky. To this day, I have no idea why. No one that I knew had a nickname for Jimmy Chung, though. There was no point in pigeonholing a name based on one quality to that man. He was just too much for it. His name, Jimmy Chung, said it all. It said everything. We saw a little less of each other during the college years, but still kept in regular touch. We both found different groups of friends, and each grew up in our own way in our own time. My key new friendship during these years was with one Martha Balsam. Smartha, as I still sometimes call her, was and is smart. World-class smart, well-read, well-bred, and strong in the head. We were fast friends immediately, and she became as close to me as Jimmy. They'd see each other frequently, though, through me, and Marty would later confide that she always thought of him as Dwayne's odd friend, Jimmy Chung. But no one appreciates a maverick at first. They're always outsiders initially, and then the world catches up. Marty figured him out in time. Jimmy and Marty fit together like a Lego brick and a Lincoln log. They were as different as can be, but they still fit. They fit. Don't get me wrong. They had few common interests to speak of, but they did have a mutual love, respect, and appreciation for each other. That's all that mattered. These two fell in love, and through their marriage had highs and though their marriage had highs and lows like any, they never doubted one another's feelings. To us on the outside, their union was the one that would always endure. The one that harbored the home that all of the friends in our circle considered its center. Some people would claim that the greatest love of Jimmy's life was Costco. But they would be wrong. Jimmy and Marty would have been married 20 years in September. He loved being a father. He treasured the role of family man and took great pride in caring and providing for his brood. Anyone who was Facebook friends with Jimmy knows that he celebrated every milestone with his daughters, and with these three, there were lots of milestones to celebrate. Their sweet, loving, colicky firstborn, Carrie, has developed into a brilliant, beautiful young lady who will soon graduate from McKinney High School, 7th in a class of 498. Knowing Carrie and her intelligence and her talents, I assume the 6 ahead of her are actually cyborgs. So I count her as first. Lauren Chung, an equally brilliant and lovely young lady, is following Carrie's path, and is equally adept socially as she is scholastically and athletically. Her father simply adored his Lala. His 7-year-old Rachel Chung was Marty's special gift to Jimmy, a third child that he desperately wanted, and one who became the quintessential definition of a daddy's girl. We will all make sure that her father's memory burns brightly in the celebrations that are a part of a young girl's life, but I know he will always be in her heart even without her help. Jimmy's fatherly talents were not limited to raising 3 girls. As his nieces Kimberly and Hannah will tell you, Jimmy never shied away from being a father figure to anyone he loved. You could count on Jimmy for that kind of commitment. I know that if my kids were ever affected by this kind of tragedy, Jimmy would be there for them the rest of his life. I now have the honor and privilege of doing that for him. I know several of you feel the same way. In addition to his family, Jimmy was a man of many varied passions. He loved UT football, going to spring games, road games, any games he could squeeze into his hectic schedule. He enjoyed bike riding, boating, golfing, rock climbing, skating guns. He was an electronic and gadget enthusiast, dug classic rock, and had scores of other hobbies, the main of which, as Chung said, was eating. He was a world-class eater. He had jumped out of planes and finished a marathon. And what impressed me was that he didn't drive it, he actually ran it. That's different that way. So I've driven. This variety of interests is not totally unheard of in a man. What made Jimmy truly unique was his enthusiasm and sheer lust for doing all of them. Jimmy truly lived his life with a relish that makes you think that maybe in retrospect he knew it was going to be short. He never wasted time, ever. But I'm not here to tell you Jimmy Chung was perfect. His death was probably the first time he was early for anything in his life. Knowing Jimmy, though, St. Peter was expecting him several years ago. Jimmy also had a digestive system that could leave you both in both shock and awe. Mostly shock. And he knew how to act up. A friend of mine shared a meme this week that said, "My level of maturity depends on who I'm with." Well, for some reason, when Jimmy and I were together, our level of maturity would be that of a 13-year-old boy. And I can tell you, he was the best friend that any 13-year-old middle-aged man could ever have. Now, no eulogy for Jimmy could be complete without mention of what I consider his most prominent quality, the one that will forever define him to most. Jimmy Chung was the most generous person I have ever met. He was generous with his time, he was with his resources, and with his substandard homework, and with his love. He would give it freely and not expect anything in return. He did it without expectation of reciprocity, and always without a second thought. I doubt there's a person in this room who doesn't have a story about Jimmy doing something extraordinarily given. I have thousands. With that being said, I join you all to say goodbye to Jimmy Chung, the best friend I ever had, and the best father I ever knew. I loved him, I will always love him, as I know so many of you will too. In the coming weeks and years, when you miss him, take solace in the fact that he lives on in the form of 3 perfect girls, and if you want to see him, just look into their eyes.